This is the first virtual meeting for MFIN in 2020. For folks that aren't familiar with the Farm to Institution Network, MFIN is a space for learning, sharing, and working together to help farms, to help farm to institution programs grow. We also are coordinating the Cultivate Michigan program, which is our local food purchasing program, which helps institutions source, serve, and track more local foods. What we're going to do is just run through the agenda really quickly and kind of give folks a lay of the land for today, and we'll get on to the content. So, can everybody hear me okay, first of all? All good. All right, so on today's agenda, we're going to do a quick welcome. We're going to do some quick introductions, and we'll run through a few farm to institution updates, as well as a recap of the 2020 Cherry Slurp, which was just a couple of weeks ago. We're really happy to have a presentation today on the state of the cherry industry in Michigan here from Mollie Woods. And then we're going to hear from Kathryn Colasanti, who's going to talk about MFIN impacts and charting our course on data collection and evaluation. And then we're just going to end with a quick recap of some of the 2020 MFIN calendar events coming up. And hopefully we'll be done right on time around 5 o'clock. So just going to do some quick introductions. My name is Noel Balacek. I'm going to be facilitating the webinar today. I'm a value chain specialist here at the Center for Regional Food Systems and co-coordinator of the Michigan Food Hub Network. I'm also a member of the Michigan MFIN management team. We have Zaire Parati from MSU Center for Regional Food Systems and also on the MFIN management team. Zaire is going to be our moderator today and managing Zoom chat box. So we encourage folks to enter any questions, comments. If you're having technical issues, please put that in the chat box, and Zaire is going to be keeping a close eye on that. So. And then we also have Abby Harper of MSU Extension. Abby's going to be our note taker today, and Abby is also on the MFIN management team. For other folks on the call, your role today is just to actively listen and participate in the webinar. And please participate again through the chat box when we prompt you or when you have any questions or issues. So what we'll do first is a quick practice just to get everybody oriented with their Zoom chat box here. So let's go ahead and just please type your name and affiliation into the chat box and introduce yourself. We'll give everybody a couple minutes to do that. All right. So a lot of familiar names here. We have Mollie Woods from the Cherry Industry Administrative Board. We have Christine Kwan from Eastern Market, Paula Martin from Groundworks, myself, Colleen Matz, Farm to Institution Specialist here, Phil Britton, welcome Phil, from Fresh Systems, Julie Darton, our colleague at MSU Extension, Kathryn Colasanti, also of the Center for Regional Food Systems, Dave Berger, Cherries Central Cooperative, thanks for joining Dave, Garrett Ziegler, also MSU Extension, Tony Alexander of Chartwells, welcome, and Zaire. All right, thank you everybody for introducing yourselves. So the next thing we're going to do, again in the chat box, we're just going to do a quick icebreaker to help kind of connect as a group. What we're going to do is go ahead. Please type something into the chat box. What is something that amazes you? Could be anything. Whoa, and now I'm playing a video.
I'll type in mine first. And what I'll do is that I'll read off all of the chat responses so we don't have a whole bunch of lovely voices overflooding the computer. So I'll read off your responses one at a time so everyone is heard. So mine says, something that amazes me, other than myself, I amaze myself sometimes, is the bond between my coworkers and how much we can trust each other to do great work. I really appreciate the close bond and relationship that is here in MFIN and CRFS. It amazes me a lot because you don't see that a lot in other workplaces. Kathryn says how dependent we are on technology, as I learned when my laptop died this week. Mariel said that video. Mollie would said photosynthesis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good one.
Colleen, Matt says bees and geology. Julia says, I'm amazed at how small the world can be. I have to run into people I know when I am away from home. Yeah. Mario says, oh, never mind. That's her introduce herself. Noel says biology is amazing. Example, that beehive. Yeah. Colleen says, and geometry. Garrett says weather, especially Michigan weather.
Yeah, amazing.
I can hear this sarcasm in your voice.
Yeah.
Paula says, power of plants on Earth. Yes. Phil says the UP.
Yeah, Phil. All right.
Karen says how each flower gives a special flavor to honey. Ooh. Christine says, I second what Phil says. Abigail says, I'm amazed at high-waisted pants this week. I've seen people with sandals on in this weather. I don't understand.
All right, I think that was everybody. So we're gonna keep things moving here. Since this is the first virtual meeting of 2020, we're just gonna take a moment to update you on the MFIN management team. So these are the folks on the MFIN management team. We have Colleen Matz, Zaire Parati. Zaire is an institution data manager at the Center for Regional Food Systems, and you may have met Zaire or recognize her from the MFIN Gathering, which was sort of your first public appearance. Yeah. Myself, we have Mariel Borgman from MSU Extension, Kathryn Colasanti from the Center for Regional Food Systems, Abby Harper from MSU Extension, Caitlin Wojak from MSU Extension, and Garrett, also from Extension. These are the folks that really help move things along and make things happen. So just want to give everybody a shout out and make sure you know who these folks are. So I also want to just take a minute to give a special thanks to the folks who are on the MFIN Advisory Committee. We have a lot of people who are returning members on the MFIN Advisory Committee in 2020. These are all leaders and practitioners of farmed institution in Michigan. And folks recognize some names there. And just a reminder to please mute yourself. There might be a little, I feel like I hear some wind or something. I'm not sure if anybody's outside walking around, but it is a little breezy out there. So, and also we are really happy to welcome a couple of new members to the MFIN Advisory Committee this year. We have Tony Alexander, who is with Chartwells and will provide some more of the contracted food service perspective to our work. And I think Tony's on the call, so glad to have you today. We also have Jane Feenstra from Jane Feenstra of Gordon Food Service had served on the advisory committee for the last few years and transitioned the role to John Fay this year. John is the U.S. Central Region Merchandising Manager at Gordon Food Service. And in conjunction with Christine Kwan from Eastern Market, who has served on the advisory committee since its launch in 2014, we now have Carolyn Michniak from Eastern Market. Carolyn manages the Grow Eastern Market program, which is one of our awesome food hubs in the state, and also a member of the Michigan Food Hub Network. And so we're really thrilled to have Caroline participate as well. Just a few MFIN updates. We have our newest Cultivate Michigan featured food, which is garlic. The tagline, "Fallen clove with garlic." I'm not sure if I made that as funny as it could be. Garlic is our 24th featured food, so that's sort of a milestone for us. It's a lot of featured foods, it's a lot of mailings and a lot of posters. So congratulations to Colleen and also Zaire, who's helping out with that right now. Info and promotional materials are freely available at cultivatemichigan.org. So please go check that out. Beautiful posters, as always. There's also, as many of you know, a whole suite of wintered featured foods to go along with garlic. So we have beets, cabbage, cherries, dry beans, and apples, and all those can be found again at cultivatemichigan.org/featured-foods. And also, speaking of featured foods, fun fact, March 1st is National Celery Day. Celery is another Cultivate Michigan featured food of previous years. And Michigan is the #2 in the US for celery production. So get out there and crunch some celery on March 1st. So we're going to transition right from that to our first presenter here. We're going to have Garrett Ziegler, who is Community Food Systems Educator with MSU Extension and is part of the Michigan management team. Garrett is based out of Grand Rapids, and he is going to give us a quick update on the 2020 Cherry Slurp. So Garrett, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Noel. Can everybody hear me okay? I assume so. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so just going to give a quick recap on the Cherry Slurp for 2020. So as Noel said, cherries are one of our winter featured foods, and specifically highlighting, obviously winter is not a time when cherries are fresh, but we wanted to highlight the use of frozen and dried cherries through our featured food promotion. So Cherry Slurp was something that was developed a few years ago to kind of mimic the Michigan Apple Crunch. Obviously everyone's familiar with the Apple Crunch. It's a big day where everybody crunches into apple in October. So we want to do something similar with cherries, and we developed the Cherry Slurp to highlight drinking smoothies that might have frozen Michigan cherries in them, or not slurping, but also highlighting some dried cherries as well. So Noel, you can head to the next slide. So for 2020 was the first year, and kind of similar to the Apple Crunch this past year in 2019, we took these over, myself, Caitlin Mojak, Meryl Borgman, others from MSU Extension and the Center, kind of managing the promotion and kind of registration of the Cherry Slurp and the Apple Crunch. So we put together a registration this year for 2020 through Qualtrics, modeled it really closely, and after similar registration that have been set up for the Michigan Apple Crunch that we use this year, that the Great Lakes Apple Crunch works on through Wisconsin Extension. So we had about 30,000 people registered through the website, and actually, technically, the Cherry Slurp, we say anybody can do it throughout the month of February. So while the original, the highlight cherry day where we ask people to slurp is February 14th, there's still time if folks are interested in slurping. Feel free to register through today or tomorrow and get out and slurp some frozen cherry smoothies tomorrow. But yeah, so there's the link there for the registration. Again, that'll be open through tomorrow. We did have over 30,000 folks registered through the system. So next slide. Just some kind of more information about the results of the Slurp. The registration did have 42 people that started fill, or 42 institutions or organizations that started filling it out, but only 17 actually went through the full process of completing registrations. Compare that to our Apple Crunch, which I think had like 250 people registered, or organizations registered, districts, school districts, organizations. So obviously a little down from that. The Cherry Slurp has never been quite as big an event as the Apple Crunch, but we're working on trying to build it up. We did have 14 K through 12 schools participate, which also included two of those included their ECE programs in that. We had 2 college and university organizations participate, and then we had one that was an other, and that was actually an MSU Extension office that I think ate some dried cherries with county, or Slurp with county commissioners, and also some folks that ate just some dried cherries with elected officials. So the Slurp is really, an opportunity to highlight the great local products we have here. So we're definitely, trying to build this up, and excited that people are participating. Of those 17 registrations, they included 30,000 individual Slurpers. So 1,200 were of the ECE. 29,560 were K through 12. A lot of those people are schools, and we had 843 adults also slurping along with their students. Next slide, no? So we previously developed a Cherry Slurp toolkit that is kind of handy for folks that are looking to slurp, don't really know exactly what they're going to be doing. We have cherry smoothie recipes in there, some of the different activities that you can do, and also a great number of different graphics that were developed that they're really nice because they just have the February 14th date, or some of them aren't dated if you're not going to be using the February 14th date. So they're really, really versatile and can be used year after year. And just a great way to provide some promotional activities for folks through social media. Next slide, no? So we did do some Slurp promotion. We had a Facebook page. We have a Facebook page called Michigan Cherry Day. I think we're only in the 90s as far as followers, so something everybody can get out and do after this call or during this call if you're on a computer, is look up the Michigan Cherry Day Facebook page and share some of that with your own organization to boost up that people that we're reaching through our Facebook promotions. We're also fortunate enough to have the Michigan Apple Crunch Bunch, who some may be familiar with, that have done a few promotional videos for the Michigan Apple Crunch previously, that helped us out and did a quick cherry promotional video as well. I think we have enough time to probably show that video for folks if you haven't seen it yet. Yeah, Mollie, do you have an opportunity to pull that up?
Yeah.
We have some of the stars on this call, I believe, actually. So, all
right, I'm gonna give this a try. If we have any issues with audio, just let me know.
Yeah, no, it's a little shaky on our end. Oh, I don't know if it's just the internet.
Michigan Cherry Slurp.
Is it, sorry, I'm just pausing here. It's because I am muted. Oh, apologies, y'all. Let me backtrack a little bit here, see if this works a little better.
Let's just add a little extra something to the smoothie. Let's add all the ingredients.
What are you guys doing?
Oh, hey, Granny.
Hey.
How's it going? We're just making our smoothies for the Michigan Cherry Slurp. Do you want to join us?
Well, I love smoothies. What's the cherry slurp?
So the Michigan Cherry Slurp is a really awesome, kind of like the Apple Crunch in the fall. It's a one-day celebration of local agriculture that we get to celebrate in February. So we make smoothies and other cherry products, and then people can celebrate Michigan cherries all year long.
One of our neighbors growing up were cherries, and they left the farm in like January or July, not
Yeah.
January.
Yeah, the fruit doesn't grow in January.
Yeah.
We're just, but because they have such a short season, cherries, we freeze them, we can them, we turn them into juice, we dry them,
Okay.
all kinds of stuff. So we're capitalizing on frozen cherries today.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so we're gonna make these awesome cherry smoothies. Did you know Michigan has the most production of cherries in the entire United States? Of Montmorency tart cherries.
Okay.
And we're currently developing some new tart cherry varieties called the Balaton, which comes from Hungary.
Whoa.
I'm hungry.
Yeah. Well, let's make a smoothie then.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Very good. What else do we like to do with cherries? Can I
I
flip
like-
out my favorite?
Yeah, please.
All right. How about black cherry ice cream?
Well, if you pick out the cherries,
The cherries are good.
Yeah.
great. Let's go share it with our friends.
Yeah.
Would you like some smoothie?
Yes. Here, take this cup. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Happy cherry slurp!
Happy cherry slurp.
Got
the cherry smoothie?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Oh, that color. Nice.
Yeah.
Celebrate Cherry Slurp on February 14th or anytime during the month of February. And make sure to register your Cherry Slurp so that it counts. You can find more information on cherries and great ideas for incorporating into your Cherry Slurp at cultivatemichigan.org.
Okay.
How's that ice cream, Paula?
It's really good.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow, well done. That was great. I'm going to switch back here. All right. Good.
Awesome. For those who don't know, that was Abby Harper, Aaron Powell, and Julie Darton there in that short film. So thanks to them for helping us out with promotion on that. Whoops. All right, moving on. The Crunch Bunch, yes. So we did have some folks that utilized the Michigan Cherry Day Facebook page and hashtags to share their slurps. We had the KVCC Valley Hub that had hosted a slurp day. It was great to see. They had lots of great pictures on there. People slurping into smoothies, and looks like they had a little photo booth set up there with some cherry eyes. As I said, we had MSU Extension District 4 that was celebrating the cherry slurp by enjoying some dried Michigan cherries with State Representative Diandon. So that was really cool to see, getting some local officials involved. And Novi School District also celebrated the cherry slurp, the bounty of Michigan cherries. They're a great state homemade cherry crisp, which was a great way to see them incorporating cherries a little bit differently. All right. Next slide, please. So that's all I really have on a recap for this year's Cherry Slurp. If folks have questions or have anything they want to talk to us about in regards to the Cherry Slurp or the Apple Crunch for that matter, feel free to reach out to myself or Caitlin. If anyone has any ideas about promotion or different partnerships we could possibly forge to get the word out a little bit more and raise that registration for next year, we'd be happy to hear about it. Again, this is kind of like our first year running this program over after Cherry Capital had kind of started to help develop it along with us. So yeah, any questions or anything?
If you have any questions,
Awesome.
you can type them up on the chat box and I'll read them out loud.
We'll just give everybody a minute or two to think if they have any questions. Go ahead and enter those. I like the idea of the cherry crisp. That seems like it could have some legs too. right. Well, if we don't have any questions or other comments, just you can always, there we go, adult cherry costumes. There you have it. Somebody get their P card out and make that happen.
Ooh, no.
I'll give it a whirl. I'm scared to pull it up where everybody can see it.
Oh, I can't. Darn it.
Oh, out of stock.
I lost it.
Oh, well.
It is?
Oh well.
No. It's right here.
Good call.
Here you go.
Oh my gosh.
It looks like a tomato.
That is excellent. All right. Well, you can always follow up with Garrett or Caitlin via email. Thanks again, Garrett, for that recap and for everything you folks did in the promotion of the Cherry Slurp. It was a really cool event this year. So thank you for that. So with that, I think we're just gonna move along here, keep things moving. So I'm really happy to introduce Mollie Woods, who's the Executive Director of the Cherry Industry Administrative Board here in Michigan. Mollie is going to share about the state of the cherry industry as we close out National Cherry Month this February. So really cool that we get to transition from Cherry Slurp to hearing about the cherry industry. So Mollie, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, good.
So
Thanks a lot. And
yeah, welcome. Just let me know when you're ready to switch slides, and I'll keep things moving.
yeah, go ahead and switch on over to my slides if you don't mind, and
Let's see.
I'll be happy to walk through it. I was pleased that Colleen reached out to me, and so I know some of you who are on the call, not all of you, but just a little background on me. I was an ag economist at Michigan State for 17 years before I came over to the board. And actually, I think, Colleen, we worked together on that first Cherry Slurp a long time ago. I actually did a slurp in Ag Hall in the atrium right before I came to the board, and that was in 2017. So yeah, it was great. I think, yeah, and something interesting about that, and I'm sure you guys have done it, but we have a promotion program, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but we also have a lot of assets that go along with that program that would fit really well with something like this. So Garrett, in the future, I'd encourage you to reach out to our group or to Cherry Marketing Institute for some of those. I tried to push it out on our social channels as much as I could, but maybe next year we can try and pull in some of our processors as well. So with that, I am happy to give you an overview on what's happening with Michigan tart cherries. I was impressed with the Apple Crunch Bunch. It sounded like they knew actually quite a bit about tart cherries, so that's great. So you can go to the next slide if you don't mind. So you mentioned that Michigan is the largest producer of tart cherries, and Montmorency tart cherries are absolutely right. Montmorency is probably at least 95% of what's grown throughout the United States on the tart side. We do have some Ballotons and a few other minor varieties, but really it's mostly Montmorency with some Ballotons thrown in. Montmorency is a bright red cherry with a clear inner inside with clear juice, and Balaton is a darker cherry, also sour, but has a dark red juice that comes out of it. My board covers 7 states, so we are a federal board. The 7 states with dots that you see there are all the commercial production regions in the U.S., although I see we left off Oregon. So right below Washington, we should have Oregon there too. And Michigan accounts for anywhere from 65 to 75% of that total. Within Michigan, the most production's in the Northwest, Leelanau Peninsula, and the other side of that area in Grand Traverse County. And then the second largest production region in Michigan and also in the country is in the Hart-Shelby area in central Michigan. Have 2 very large processors in that region, not just of cherries, but of all fruit. And that's Peterson Farms and Michigan Food Processors Cooperative. They have a retail label called Indian Summer, which you might be familiar with. Next slide. So They also, the Apple Crunch Bunch also mentioned this, but tart cherries are really unique, and I know that there are some other crops like this, but oh yeah, I see the quote from the comment about Utah. Utah is actually the second largest state in the country. Not many people realize that, but there are a lot, about an hour south of Salt Lake. So, but within the U.S., we have only about a 6 to 8 week harvest period. And so that's why you really don't see fresh tart cherries very much. They're extremely perishable. So within that 6 week period, we have about 250 million pounds on average that are harvested, pitted, and frozen, canned, or juiced. And it is a really busy time when it's harvest time around here. And the majority of our products start in a frozen form, sometimes for later processing. So someone mentioned dried cherries. Those start out as frozen cherries, and then they're dried later. Next slide. So a little bit of an overview about my board. The Cherry Industry Administrative Board, and I'm located here in DeWitt, not far from some of you there on campus. We are a federal marketing order for tart cherries. We're one of about 40 orders in the U.S. We fund generic promotion, fund and manage generic promotion, research on the health benefits of tart cherries, and then we're one of only 3 boards in the United States that is allowed to do supply management, and I can answer questions about that later if you want to. My board is made up of 19 growers and processors from all 7 states. And we just elected a new executive committee in January. Todd Fox is a grower in West Central. He's my chairman. Aaron Peterson, who's the president and CEO of Peterson Farms, is my vice chair. And then we have some representation from Wisconsin, Utah, and New York as well. Next slide, please. So something that's unique about cherries is that, you know, I mentioned supply management, but our federal marketing order, one of the purposes of the order was to remove cherries from the market or add to the market as production varies above and below sales, allowing for some sales growth. So we've consistently had cherries across all crops. Tart cherries have the highest coefficient of variation of any crop produced in the United States. So one year we can have 100 million pounds, and the next year we can have 300 million pounds. So if you think about the supply chain challenges of that in a processed product, we don't have enough processing capacity to handle a 300 million pound crop. And then we don't want to lose our markets when we have a 100 million pound crop. So we try to balance that out a little bit. That was the purpose of the development of the order, and that's how we still try to operate. So when we have a really big crop, our options are we can divert from the market and place it in reserve in the freezer, try to increase sales, which is what our promotion program does, or we destroy product. And so probably the most negatively viewed thing we do is when cherries have to be dumped in the orchard. But honestly and historically, that's happened with or without the federal marketing order, because some processors just can't process fast enough to bring in all the cherries. Next slide, please. So in 2006, our order increased the amount of funding it would put toward promotion. And so we, our growers voted through an amendment process to add a little over ½ cent a pound, or about $12 a ton, to support promotion and research through our marketing order. We recognized at that time that we needed to target healthy consumers who were interested in sports, exercise, anti-inflammatory foods, and try to move a little bit away from dessert, because dessert was our traditional market, but people were eating less dessert, and we recognize that. We have had a very successful promotion program, and actually it's pulled in a lot of Turkish and Polish imports. And so that is a real challenge for our industry right now, because not only do we have plenty of cherries, we also are pulling in a lot of imports because we have a very attractive market that pays top dollar for these products. Next slide. Someone mentioned earlier the forms. We do produce multiple forms, and we have a really flexible processing, or group of processors here in Michigan and nationwide. One thing I haven't talked about very much is that a big function of our order up here in DeWitt, one thing we do a lot of is collect a lot of data. And so currently we track 98 different products in the industry. And so we have 98 different pack sizes, mixes of sugar, product forms, and we track all of those for our sales and inventory reporting. So if you're looking for a particular form, I can say that we've got it. We have seen growth in sales of puree and use of concentrate, tart cherry juice concentrate as an ingredient in a lot of new products. And we're seeing more sales of individually quick frozen cherries as well. And we sell those in bulk forms as well as in consumer packs. I think one challenge, as we think about the cherry slurp or we think about increasing consumption, one challenge we have is that most of our sales are still by a truckload and as an ingredient and not so much in consumer size. But we are seeing that change, especially in juice dried and some sizes of our frozen product. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned, our industry recognized that we needed to shift more toward no sugar added products, but this does take time because our processors have to adjust to this. And we recognize that there are a lot of changing consumer preferences. And this year, especially because of that change, people eating less sugar, because of the imports we're seeing in the industry, we do have a lot of inventory. And I can say confidently that our processors are seeking new and different outlets for our products. We have a website at choosecherries.com with a processor, a sourcing list. And you can click on that and find all kinds of sourcing options for cherries. If you're interested, or contact me, I can get you in touch with any handler. Next slide, please. And this is just our homepage on choosecherries.com. If you click on the tart cherry industry up there on the right, it will take you to our processor directory. Next slide. And then where to buy. So you can look up anyone purchasing, or you're interested in buying any of these forms. We've got product category. In Michigan, I just listed kind of from memory all the folks who sell cherries here in the state. So you could find pretty much cherries in any form you were looking for if you visited one of these processors. And I think that's about it, Noel. Did I have another slide in there? So, I'll just say that we're very interested in exploring school and institutional sales. We do sell to USDA quite a bit. One question or challenge for you all, I'd love some feedback on how we can better inform our industry about the opportunities here in Michigan and how to, interact more with your group. I'm happy to stop talking now. I've got my email address up there, the website, and if you have any questions about cherries, I guess throw them at me. Dave Barger, who I think, Noel, you mentioned earlier, he's with Cherry Central Cooperative. I asked him to join today. He's very interested in this market and excited about it. And so, Dave, if you want to say anything too, you're welcome to, but I just thought this was a good opportunity for us to interact with this network. So thank you.
Thank you, Molly. That was really awesome to hear. Some really interesting facts there, and I was not familiar with the choosecherries.com site, but that's a really cool resource. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else, feel free to hop on. Dave, if you want to jump on and say a word or two, you're welcome to. There is one question here, Molly, from Paula, just to see if you were aware of the 10 cents a meal program for schools.
I am not, and I guess I'm interested.
All right, that's a great opportunity we have, and so maybe we can loop back around and connect with you on that.
Great.
All right, looks like there will be a couple of meetings coming up, and Paul is going to send some resources. Karen says she likes the idea of a crunch promo for a variety of Michigan foods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's a question for you. Phil Britton is asking, what are the food safety requirements for your producers, especially moving into the fresh frozen world?
Um, uh, so I guess I'm no food safety expert. I will say that all of our processors are, they're selling into every industrial or retail market you can think of. And so in terms of thinking of that as a challenge, I don't think it's a challenge. Now, fresh coming from the farm, most of them are being shipped directly to a processing facility. I believe all of our growers are GAP certified, but beyond that, I can't. I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding a little bit if you're asking about an actual fresh sale versus processed. They all have pretty standard certifications that you can imagine in a food processing facility.
Yeah, I
Dave,
think maybe what Phil was getting at was whether the growers are GAP certified, and it sounds like that is something that you require.
Yeah, well, I don't, but if their processor would absolutely require that.
Right. Colleen's asking, what would you say is the top or toughest barrier to institutional sales for cherry growers and processors?
It's a good question, Colleen.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Molly? Do you think it's
I did have a really interesting experience, actually. We've been talking about more sales of cherries to schools and institutions for a while now, as you can imagine, and we have had several bonus purchases of dried. And so, the tendency tends to be, at least on the national level, USDA wants. They tend to want single serve, and most of what we, to keep costs down, we would sell items, or bonus purchases would go in 16 or 16-pound or larger packs. And so one thing that was interesting is that my son goes to Grand Ledge High School, and he said, "Oh man, we had cherries on the lunch line today. I took 2 or 3," and he took a picture of them, and they were packed in individual cups. So the person who's serving the food in the lunch line had to take those cherries out of the bulk pack and individually package them in 1 ounce or 2 ounce cups for each person, and then had to handwrite a label to describe what was in the cup. And so I took that back to our processors and said, hey, I think it wasn't, somebody said a serving size. No, that's not the reason. It was a different reason. But anyway, it was still really interesting to me, because the disconnect sometimes when you're dealing with, people who sell a lot of bulk items, they don't always think about the needs at the school level. And so I think that interaction with our processors is really useful to, think about it from the perspective of the school lunch folks, and not from your perspective, which is you want to get those cherries into their hands, and USDA says, well, you want to send it in a 40-pound pack because that's the cheapest, or you have some price reason to do it, and the price reason maybe is not always the driving factor. There's some other factors. And the question about dried cherries packaged like raisins, yes, they can. We actually have a processor who does that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Molly, and something to think about, because that sort of packaging is it's it's a whole different thing for a lot of those processors to deal with.
Yeah.
And David says, as exporters, cherry companies must comply with many standards from many countries, so it gets really involved in certifications and standards for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the packaging question might be also a food safety and handling issue as well. They don't want to put
Yes.
a big pan of them out with a spoon. And Molly, can you just quickly explain what bonus purchases are, just so folks know what you're referring to there?
Yeah. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, because some of you probably know more about this than I do, but every year within the federal budget, right, there's entitlement dollars that go to purchasing foods for schools, and there's some flexibility about how those dollars are spent. There's another pot of money that is called Section 32 or bonus funds. And from what I understand, this comes from tariff funds that are collected at the border, and it's meant to alleviate surplus in agricultural industries. And so when you say there's a Section 32 purchase, then an industry, the processing apples here in Michigan goes and could request that the government make a bonus purchase of a product. We, as an industry, have gone down to DC and said, we are in a situation where we need a bonus purchase to alleviate some of the price pressure in the industry to help our growers. And so there will be a purchase in that case using that stream of funding. Typically, it goes to needy families. And some of the other, I think there are 5 different, target groups in the USDA system. But it's kind of easy to say needy families, tribal networks, and so forth. Not always does it end up in schools, but sometimes. But mainly it goes into like the food bank network. I don't know, I can't comment on the trade mitigation dollars. I don't think those are Section 32 dollars. I think that's coming from someplace else. But when I talk about USDA purchases, where we would like to move more is into the entitlement stream, and move away from the bonus purchase stream, because bonus purchases it's not truly a market. We are interested more in how do we become a regular part of the menu for schools.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Thank you for breaking that down. Any other questions, folks? Comments? Oh, I see one more here. Glenn Knopfsinger, K-12 food service consultant and part of the MFIN advisory committee, is joining me, Molly, and David for our meeting on Tuesday. He knows those important ins and outs of how school food works. He's also helping with trade mitigation work here too. Great.
Great.
Really interesting conversation.
10 cents, Michigan. Okay, great.
Yeah. All right. Last call for questions here. We've got a few more minutes we can. All right, I think that is going to be it. So I just want to say thank you again, Molly, for joining us today and sharing about Michigan Cherries. Sounds like I have some really interesting conversations lined up with our team. So we look forward to working with you more going forward.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Great. All right. Thanks. So what we're going to do is I'm going to skip back up here in the slides and introduce Kathryn Colasanti, who's an academic specialist here at the Center for Regional Food Systems. Kathryn leads the MFIN impacts and research work, and she will be sharing more about the 2018 Cultivate Michigan Data Brief, which is hot off the press. Evaluation of the MFIN Network Gathering this past November, which many of you folks attended, and what's next in terms of charting our course throughout and beyond 2020. So Oops, give me boom. There we go.
All right.
Kathryn,
Cool.
take it away.
No, appreciate it. So we saw the whole thing backwards. Now we'll go through it forwards. Yeah, you can start with the next slide. So as Noel said, I wanted to touch on 3 pieces today. So first, the 2018 data brief. So that's where we track our progress towards that 20% Michigan by 2020 goal. Touch on results from the evaluation of the November 2019 gathering, and then talk a little bit about where we're headed as a network and the feedback that we've gotten so far and the feedback that we're hoping to collect. So next slide. So we'll start with the data brief. Go ahead. All right, so as Noel said, hot off the presses, this just went up on the Center for Regional Food Systems website. So this is our 3rd annual data brief. So this is looking at data for 2018. And what you see here, we have continued to get more institutions signed up and participating in the campaign. So we have almost 90 participating institutions and other businesses. A lot of the growth that we've seen over the last year and a half has been with schools and districts, and they continue to be the largest institution type that's participating. And then the other thing we do in the brief is for the institutions that share what the amounts are that they've purchased overall and from Michigan for at least 3 of 4 quarters in a calendar year are eligible for an award. And 3 institutions provided this data and hit milestones in local purchasing levels. So 2 reached 15% local and 1 reached 10% local. And if you were at that November gathering, we presented those awards at that time. And those went to Friendship Center of Emmett County, West Ottawa School District, and Zeeland School District. You can go to the next slide. So one thing we did differently in this year's data brief, and partly because, as you see, we only are getting reports on actual spending from a very small number of institutions at this point. So what we decided to do is look in some more detail at the specific forms of foods that institutions are purchasing. So here you see our 20 featured, Cultivate Michigan featured foods. So the 20 that were featured as of 2018. And what we did is show in this graph what forms they were purchased from Michigan and forms overall. So you can see that a lot of the Michigan purchases are in that fresh form. But at least one, or all of the featured foods, and I'll say it this way, all of the featured foods were purchased in at least one form. So it's cool to see that schools are utilizing these products that we're featuring. And another thing that you can see from this graph is the level of purchasing in Michigan processed versus overall. So we see a lot of these featured foods are purchased in a processed form, not as often from Michigan though. Next slide. So yeah, again, just highlighting, I think what this is showing us is there's a lot of market potential here, right? A lot of schools are wanting and needing, schools and other institutions wanting and needing these products in some sort of minimally processed form. And there's an opportunity for Michigan suppliers maybe to meet some of that demand. Just as one example, the 3 institutions that we had the data for spent over $20,000 on minimally processed carrots, and only 3% of that budget went towards Michigan carrots. So just kind of showing the market opportunity there. Next slide. Also, we can see by looking at the specific foods market opportunities for fresh product too. So what this graph is showing is the Cultivate Michigan featured foods that are most often purchased in that fresh form. And this is excluding milk and apples here. Those are off the charts in volumes. But the the top 5 after milk and apples are tomatoes, peppers, berries, salad greens, and stone fruit. So these are products that institutions are purchasing in the fresh form, and they are getting some Michigan product, but also a lot of room for growth there and getting more Michigan fresh. Next slide. The other thing we did in this data brief, oops, we back up one, and this was new for this year's data brief, is look at the 10 cents schools and districts. So this was cool because we have a lot more data for these schools and districts than we had through the Cultivate Michigan survey platforms. So this is from the 57 schools and districts that participated in 10 cents in the 2018-2019 school year. And what you're seeing in the table is what they spent on the Cultivate Michigan featured foods. So as we know, apples are very popular food, and that was purchased by almost all of the districts in the 10 cents program. But blueberries, berries, cucumbers, all about 50,000. So you see kind of the level of popularity or frequency of use from the different featured foods, and also get a sense of the variety that schools and districts are purchasing. So I thought it was cool that 8 of the Cultivate Michigan featured foods were purchased by at least 40 different schools and districts. And then on average, each school and district purchased an average of 12 of the different featured foods. So they're using quite a substantial variety of the Cultivate Michigan featured foods, which is cool to see. So that's kind of snapshot highlight of the data brief, and I'll pause there and see if there are any questions before I move into the next segment. And I'll just add too that we've been doing these data briefs now. This is the 3rd one, as I mentioned, and we'll do one for 2019 also. But as we are looking forward for MFIN, we're re-examining tracking as part of it and trying to ask the question, what tracking is most important or most useful for the network to continue to do? So something to think about for all of us. Yeah, so the data brief is available on the Center for Regional Food Systems website, and we can send out that specific link and follow up meeting materials. Sound effects.
Sorry about that, folks.
Question on, have we analyzed data by pounds purchased? We have not. The Cultivate Michigan tracking platform asked for dollars rather than pounds. And pounds is difficult because, as we know, different things weigh different amounts. So it gets really tricky to talk about different product types when pounds is so different across different foods. And we have with the Cultivate, or not the Cultivate Michigan, with the 10 cents data, we have cases, but we don't have pounds for that either. Yeah.
I'll unmute my.
Okay. All right, so
Is price a barrier for any of these items? Wondering about salad greens. Yeah, salad greens, it's in the, that top 5 or 6, at least with respect to the 10 cents participating schools and districts. I think salad greens is a product type that can mean a whole lot of different things, and we've done some of that coding of the 10 cents data, what's classified as a salad green. So I'm sure there's a range of price points, but I can't specifically speak to whether that's experienced as a barrier.
Colleen.
For sharing that link, yeah.
Yep. So for folks, you can follow that link if you want to find this data brief shortly.
Okay, well, if there's any other questions or comments on the data brief, feel free to weigh in with those, but I will move on to the next segment. So, as you all know, we brought together folks from across the network for a gathering in November of last year and wanted to just share a few highlights that came from the evaluation from that event. Next slide. So we had about 70 people attend and 48 people completed an evaluation. And one of the questions asked them to identify their role within Michigan Farm to Institution Network. So you see the largest group of people were considered advocates or supporters of farm to institution, so not in the supply chain, but working to help advance goals related to farm to institution. The folks representing K through 12 schools and districts was about a quarter of the attendees. And then producers, food hubs, and college universities, each of those groups represented about 10% of attendees. And then also had a few folks from hospital healthcare sector, food distributors, and a few other. Notably, ECE was not represented. There weren't any representatives from an ECE, at least within the evaluation. Next slide. So we asked people what brought you to this gathering, what motivated you to attend, and networking to network was the response that we got from the largest number of people. Also, a lot of people said they want to learn what others are doing. More than half indicated they came to represent their institution, business, or organization. And note here, people could have responded with more than one of these answers, right? About 40% came to learn about resources available, and about 14% said they came to learn new skills. Next slide. Then a parallel question, we asked folks how the gathering has impacted you. And we see from this that people were able to meet their expectations from the gathering. So they were able to learn what others are doing. That was 90% said they were able to learn that. More than half inspired to work with others. Also about half represented their institution, business, or organization, or learned to look at issues in a new way, farm to institution issues specifically. Around 40% said they learned about resources available. And then fewer gained confidence to talk about issues or gain new skills. Next slide. On networking specifically, we asked a pair of questions to identify network impacts. So the extent to which people plan to contact at least one new person in hopes of finding a way to collaborate, and whether people reconnected and strengthened an existing relationship with a colleague outside of their own organization. And I thought these results were impressive here. So on meeting new people, everyone that responded agreed that they met someone that they would like to try to collaborate with. 2/3 of people said they strongly agree. And strengthening existing relationships, again, very high level of agreement, about half. strongly agreed or agreed, only 8% disagreed. So really high level of networking that was able to happen there. Next slide. And then just a few quotes to share kind of what stood out to a couple folks from the day. One person said, appreciation for modeling a thoughtful way to lift up equity as an important lens for MFIN. And that was something done a little bit more intentionally in this network meeting compared to previous meetings. Can be useful for others doing food systems work. The emphasis on what we learned and honoring how far the work has come in the keynote was very uplifting. And it's brought more awareness to the challenges that are out there for farm to institution. So I think I'll pause there again and see if there's any questions on the 2019 MFIN Network Gathering. Okay, we can jump into the next segment, but again, if anything occurs to you, feel free to add that to the chat box and we can always revisit. So, oh, will the gathering be an annual event? So that 2019 gathering was actually the first time that Michigan Farm to Institution Network had gathered as an independent network since its launch in 2014. So there've been a few joint network meetings. MFIN met with the Food Hub Network and with the Local Food Council Network, but hadn't met as a standalone network previously. And I would say to that question, TBD. So we we definitely heard that people really, and you can see it in the evaluation results, really appreciated that opportunity to network and learn what others are doing and hear stories. And I should mention too, we will be sharing out audio recordings from some of the segments of that day in upcoming MFIN newsletters. So you can watch for that if you weren't able to participate on that day. But we haven't made specific plans on network gathering frequencies.
Colleen Matt said that our MFIN Advisory Committee suggested meeting in person every other year in the off years of the Good Food Summit, but we'll see if we can manage the time, money, and capacity to pull them off. And just like Kathryn said, TBD.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the third piece I wanted to share today, and this builds on the gathering, is what we've started to hear on the impact and value of MFIN as a network. So the network launched in 2014, and now we're in a transition year and thinking about where we head as a network through 2020 and beyond. So starting to ask what's next for MFIN and engage all MFIN members in charting our course for 2020 and beyond. So now we get to the part of my slides that I had made some beautiful updates to that got lost on an unnamed cloud. So we're just working with what we have. Next slide. So at the gathering, we had discussions and asked people to share what brings you to the network. So it's similar to a question that was in the evaluation, but more in a discussion form. And these are some of the specific responses that we saw most frequently. So the opportunity to make connections, to just learn how to do a farm to institution process, to meet new people in person, to connect to food hubs specifically, and as a way to help farmers. So maybe buyers say, how can I help farmers in my community by connecting to the products they have available? Next slide. So this is the same question, looking at responses, but in bigger picture categories. So what brings you to the network? What we just saw were some of the specific responses within these categories. Most of them were learning and networking. And then these are the overall categories. So you can see the main drivers that are bringing people to the network are learning, that was mentioned by 25 people, networking, almost as many by 22 people, supply chain development, resources, understanding the big picture, health, and policy were the other categories that came up. Okay, next slide. So now we're looking at some of the specific topics that were mentioned in that category of learning. So I talked about the how-to, that was one of the most frequent. Some of the other things that came up were maybe specific to ECE, breaking into institutional markets as a grower or a supplier, looking at working through challenges, USDA requirements, aligning partners. Lots of different thoughts here. Next slide. Okay, and then these are some of the specific topics that came up in the networking category. So some folks mentioned just making connections generally, and some folks mentioned making connections or networking with specific actors in the supply chain, whether hospitals, farmers, food hubs, etc. Next slide. And then a related but slightly different question. In the small group discussions, we asked people to share how has MFIN been helpful to you, or how has MFIN helped you. So some of the themes that came out there were just hearing success stories, knowing that other people have had success in farm to institution efforts and understanding what that looks like. The marketing materials related to Cultivate Michigan featured foods. Again, referencing the networking opportunities and connections to specific supply chain points. Next slide. And then also in response to that question, some bigger picture thoughts came up. So understanding positive impacts, group therapy, that's not always easy work. Sometimes it's nice to just be in the room with people who are struggling with similar things. Being part of a network can give credibility or legitimacy to the work and provide a statewide voice for what's happening, a sense of accountability to local communities. There's an opportunity to build capacity, develop some common terminology, used and understand shared language, bring together diverse membership, and show that good work is happening. Next slide. And then these last comments also relate to the bigger picture value of the network and ways it's been meaningful to people. These, however, came from the evaluation responses. So we have the ability to connect it with an individual's role within the network. So for example, a food hub representative shared, MFIN has provided invaluable network connections that have helped me move my organization's mission forward. A farm to institution advocate shared, MFIN has provided me a larger body of practitioners to connect with and get ideas from, which influences my own hyper-local work. A Ecology University representative shared, the support has been incredible. Connecting our institution to resources has been invaluable. And then here, this last one, talking about that idea of credibility. So a food hub representative shared, participation in and the existence of the network provides credibility to my work because it illustrates that there is a broader movement. So as a management team, we've been chewing on this feedback that we've gotten from the network gathering discussions and from the evaluation, and it's starting to seed our thinking in terms of looking at this transition year. And just helping us tell the story of where we've come as a network over this last 6 years and what the network has meant to members and to those who've been involved with it. And what we want to do is to continue to build on that. So we heard from folks who were at the gathering, but MFIN has over 650 members, and we know there are a lot more people out there that we haven't yet heard from. So we're going to be early next week sending out a request for some more input on ways that MFIN has been helpful to the members since they've been involved, and use that as a way to continue to refine our thinking on the activities that MFIN should continue to do, and to again tell that story of the evolution of the network as a way and a foundation for deciding where our next steps are as a network. So that will be going out early next week, and particularly if you weren't at the network gathering and didn't have a chance to give us your input then, we'd love to hear from you in that way next week. So I think that was my last slide. Happy to take questions on any of those comments that I shared, or kind of where we're heading in this trajectory of gathering input in our transition year.
So Abigail said, just so folks are aware, one of the pieces of the gathering was story sharing from the network. These were recorded and will be shared out through the MFIN newsletter over the next couple of months. Colleen says thank you. And can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, because we were having some issues in the beginning.
And I'll just add here too that we, alongside our effort to, as a management team, understand what activities have been most helpful for network members, we're also working with our evaluation partners at University of Michigan, and they will be putting together a case study about the evolution of the network. So they're kind of reflecting back while we're looking forward, but those two pieces will be very complementary and just helping us tell our story and understand where we've been and where we're going.
David asked if all of these slides are available.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to share my slides, and I think we could send out the slide deck to registrants.
Colleen says that we can try if the file isn't too long. And hopefully we'll be able to share this recording of the meeting.
All right, well, I think we're just gonna keep things moving and maybe we'll just wrap up a little bit early today. But if folks think of other questions or comments later, feel free to reach out to the presenters via email. And we will cover a couple more things and be done for the day. So let me skip back down here. All right, so just gonna wrap up today's meeting with a few updates and notes on other events coming up in 2020. We have a handful more virtual network meetings like today lined up. So if you have not marked your calendars for these, please do right now. I'm sure they've been sent out as well via email, but just make note of these. Each virtual meeting will be joined by a couple presenters and talk about some interesting topics. So hope you can join us for those. We also have some other in-person events coming up in 2020. The Detroit Cultivate Michigan Marketplace, I'm told, just got a date. So I think that's going to be on April 28th. And Colleen, correct me on the time, but 4 to 6, was that what I heard? So mark your calendars for that, 4 to 6 p.m. We also, there's going to be a National Farm to Cafeteria Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the end of April. I know there's going to be a few folks from Michigan at that conference, so hopefully we see some of the network members there. October is the Michigan Apple Crunch. November 16th, Good Food Summit here in Lansing, so please plan to join that. And you can visit cultivatemichigan.org for more events and updates. And just to explain a bit more about the Cultivate Michigan Marketplace event, we've done a few of these in the past. It's sort of a, I guess we would describe it as kind of a matchmaking event where we have suppliers and buyers in the same space, gives people an opportunity to interact and talk business. So if you are a grower or you are a food service buyer and you are interested in sourcing local, these are great opportunities to connect with folks in your region. So previous Cultivate Michigan Marketplace events were held in Northern Michigan and West Michigan. We had one in Ann Arbor. So this is definitely going to have a Southeast Michigan focus. So if you are in the region, I highly recommend you plan to attend. And I just wanted to open it up for anybody that has any other announcements of upcoming events or happenings. If there's other things going on in your neck of the woods that you want to share with the group, please do so now. You can enter it into the chat pod and we'll share it with the group. So just give everybody a minute to think about that. All right, I'm not seeing any comments, but if you do have an event that comes up, feel free to send it along to us and we will make sure that makes it onto our events page and help get the word out about that. And that is it for today. So we're gonna wrap up a little bit early. Everybody can get on the road. Thank you all for joining. Thanks especially to our presenters and to our moderators, Air and note taker Abby, and everybody else that participated. We're glad you joined us. So look forward to seeing you all on the next call. Thanks.
I see some thumbs up. Happy weekend. Oh, I'm gonna say that now. Happy weekend.
Yes. All right.